First of all, good job coming up. Nice little hike, right? What I want to do now is introduce to you, I know you've already heard Jimmy's first name, Jimmy Braudt, call sign Scooby, and he is an F-35 pilot, but he didn't always fly F-35s. He used to fly the AV-8B Harrier. And so for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a precursor in some ways to the F-35. And so every Harrier squadron was known as a VMA squadron. And so that's fixed wing marine attack as compared to the VMFA, which is fixed wing marine fighter attack. And so the Harrier's job was to go in and bomb the bad guys, all right? And it was good at doing that. But it also had that VSTOL capability, so it could take off, short takeoff, and do the vertical landings, and you've probably seen them in air shows. They'll move back and forth like in the air like a helicopter. Pretty capable aircraft. But unfortunately, a lot of people perished early on in the Harrier days because it would do crazy things that they didn't expect or maybe weren't accounted for. And so Scooby flew that for how many years?
About 4 years.
About 4 years, and then he transitioned to the F-35, and that's what he currently flies. But something else I'll share that he does, or he did, was he was a MOTS instructor. And so for those of you who are familiar with the Marine Corps, you may know what MOTS is, and you may know what WTI is, the Weapons and Tactics Instructor Course, which is actually just beginning right now. And so you guys are going to see a lot more gray helicopters, gray airplanes flying all over the place, which is awesome this time of year. It happens twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And so there's no movies about WTI and there's no movies about MOTS, but there are movies about Top Gun, right? Probably most of you have seen that or heard of that. Well, so the Navy Top Gun course is very similar to what the Marine Corps WTI course is like. And in some ways, and actually in many ways, I would say the Marine Corps course is much more extensive because it integrates the entire MAGTAF, so the Marine Air Ground Task Force. And so you'll see, like I said, those helicopters and those jets and those prop planes, but also you'll see Marines in desert camis driving all over the place around Yuma. And so they're integrated with the course. And so you'll have forward air controllers or joint terminal air controllers out talking to the aircraft from the ground, telling them where to bomb this target as if they were in war. So Scooby was an instructor over there for the F-35, which is, you only are asked to be an instructor if you're one of the best. And I'm not blowing smoke when I say that. And so it was quite an honor for him to be able to do that as an F-35 pilot. And he has recently been selected for command of a squadron, of an F-35 squadron. And specifically the Vikings, so VMFA 225, right?
That's right.
So, and the Vikings have a long history, and I won't go into the history of that right now. But what's cool to me is who he is, but he is a fellow Christian, and he's got a family he's raising while he's doing all that. And so sometimes we miss the big picture because there's a lot involved, right? There's a lot involved in being an F-35 pilot. There's a lot involved in being a MOTS instructor, being a Marine officer. But even more importantly is who he's serving. Yeah, he's serving his country, and he's serving what he has been called to do as far as supporting the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But he's serving God. And that's something we all need to keep in mind. That purpose is beyond just what maybe you see at the surface, which is pretty cool. And while he's doing that, he's raising a family. And we've got Ted here with us today as part of his family. So thanks for being here, Ted. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jimmy, call sign Scooby Braudt. And thanks for being here, Scooby.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, men. Everybody hear me okay? Okay, you guys let me know if you're not able to hear me. So I'm going to talk about 3 big words today, okay? Let's start with endurance and patience. Okay, it took a little bit of endurance to get up the mountain. So, Josiah, can you tell me what endurance means to you? Yeah, pushing through. I wrote down fortitude, resolution, and strength. What about patience? Can anybody tell me what patience means? Suffering for what?
Suffering for what you're. Suffering for what you're being patient for, which builds character.
Very good. That's good.
That builds hope for what you're being patient for.
That's great. Yeah, stamina, serenity, tolerance. That's great definition. To me, you put those 2 words together, and you get kind of a equation there. I know this isn't math class, but to me, endurance plus patience equals something called perseverance, okay? Perseverance, determination, grit, insistence towards a goal, the effort to do something despite opposition or difficulties or failure. So I'm going to talk about something that happened to me about 5 years ago. Like Mr. Jim said, I'm a Marine officer. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I went to college in New York, and then I entered the Marine Corps. I was a Harrier pilot for 3 years. I deployed a couple times on board ship and deployed to Afghanistan, and then I was a forward air controller. And a forward air controller is a person that embeds with the infantry and calls in airstrikes in order to protect our brothers and sisters on the ground. After that, I went to start flying the F-35. I was in one of the first groups to start flying that airplane. Mr. Aaron trained me to fly that airplane in the early days about 10 years ago. And then we moved to Iwakuni, Japan. So a lot of people here have spent time in Japan and been there, and that's where we lived for about 3 years. In that squadron, I was operations officer for the first deployment on board ship. I became highly qualified as an instructor in the airplane. Again, thanks to Mr. Aaron. He was my instructor, he was my teacher, and I became a leader in the squadron. So we were forward deployed, we were doing very important work in support of our country and support of the Constitution. So young men, we know that we're wild at heart, right? We're competitive. We like to do outdoor things. We like to take risks, especially military, law enforcement type folks. We like physical training. It kind of takes us back to our caveman days of preparing to take down a woolly mammoth, right, with nothing but an 8-foot long spear. I personally like sports. I like physical training, weightlifting, running, hunting, fishing, surfing, certainly hiking. I played a lot of sports in high school and college. Those things encourage a competitive spirit, right? And they keep you in shape for a demanding job or what God asks for you to be a young man or to be an old man. And in a lot of our cases, it keeps you in shape for your job. So to be a fighter pilot, you have to be able to be physically fit, to put the gear on, to get in the airplane, and to pull a lot of G's and stretching your neck while we're wearing heavy gear. Japan, a beautiful country. The people are very polite and kind. You drive on the opposite side of the road there. At the time there, I had a 6-year-old son, Ted. I had a 3-year-old son named Hank. Some of you have met him. And I had a 4-month-old daughter named Sarah. So one day, everything changed. I was into cycling. Everybody been on a long bike ride before, like greater than 10 miles? Okay, good. So every week I would do a 20 to 30 mile bike ride because it's beautiful country. And one day I was riding about doing my standard Sunday ride. I had all my protective gear on. I had a light on the back of my bicycle. I was in a construction zone, and like I said, we're on the opposite side of the road there, so I was on the left side of the road, because with bicycles you go with traffic. If you're running, you go against traffic. So I was on the left side of the road, and someone tried to pass me. They nudged my handlebars in an area that was a little bit too tight, and it caused me to wipe out. And I remember thinking at the time, okay, no big deal, I'll slide out of this, I'll be scraped up, and I'll limp home. And this all happened in slow motion. Right then I looked up as I'm skidding out and saw an oncoming car from the opposite lane, right? So now on my right side. So as I'm wiping out, this oncoming car, an SUV, hit me, going about 40 miles an hour, right on my left side of my body, okay? So that changed everything pretty drastically for me. I broke my humerus in half. That's this bone here. So it was broken in half to where one bone's laying on top of the other. I broke almost all of my ribs. Both of my lungs collapsed immediately. That's called a double pneumothorax. So my lungs started filling with blood. I tore my knee open down to the quadricep muscle. I shattered my thumb in about 15 places. Broke my collarbone, my shoulder, tore up my AC joint. All your muscles and tendons that give you strength and flexibility in here were completely torn. But I didn't have a single head injury, neck injury, spine injury, no hip problems, anything like that. And that's a miracle of God, right? God saved me for something in that moment. I've had 2 friends killed in bicycle accidents, and if that accident had been 10 degrees different or just a slight change in angle, I probably wouldn't be here today. Just the fact that I was conscious, right? I didn't have a head injury, a neck injury. That was a miracle in itself. So I'm lucky to be alive. I'm blessed my injuries weren't worse, and the injuries were extensive. So after the accident, I spent a month in the Japanese hospital getting surgeries on my arm, on my thumb, on my shoulder. I even had a lung surgery because one of the ribs pierced the lung, so it wouldn't heal properly. They had to patch me up and get me healthy enough to travel, and then I was medevac to the United States. That put a little speed bump on my career and my life up to that point, right? And I say it jokingly as a speed bump, but this is the story about how I came back stronger than ever, okay? Mentally, physically, and spiritually. And I think you'll find as I discuss this story that I'm the subject of the story, but the author is somebody else entirely, okay? All right, Matthew, can you stand up and read the verse that I gave you? Yep, Proverbs 16:9. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. So we can have plans and intentions in our life, but the Lord is in charge of it, right? Are we in charge of every event every single day? Absolutely not. The traffic, going to work, your sore ankles this afternoon, your sister gets a cold, something like that. No, we make plans, but the Lord is who guides our steps. He's sovereign over everything. Does everybody know what sovereign means? It's ultimate, infinite power. Go ahead.
I was just going to say ruler.
Yeah, the ruler. So as men, our heart plans what we want to do, but the Lord is directing our steps. The Lord is supreme authority over all creation, okay? This mountain, this dirt we're standing on, America, Mexico, you and me and all the creatures in this world. He is self-governing, right? So he rules himself. Now, I didn't plan in my heart for that accident to happen, right? We talked about my career up to that point, my life with my family. It interrupted everything. And it's easy to get down and wonder why bad things happen to you, okay? Some things are outside your control. In fact, most things are outside your control. And we can't control events, right? We can only control our response to events. But if we believe that God is sovereign, then we know that everything happens for a reason, and not just any reason, not just a cop-out, like everything happens for a reason, but God's reason, right? God has a perfect design for each one of us. Like we were saying this morning, trusting God's timing and in his purpose for us. So I didn't know why God did what he did in his infinite power, and he just reached down and pushed the pause button on my life. Was he telling me to slow down? Was he telling me to have more discipline? Was he teaching me a lesson in patience? I don't know. What I do know, and it took me some time to struggle and figure this out, is that he did this intentionally, right? He didn't do it out of anger or punishment. He did it out of love, because God is love. So what does God say about discipline? Michael, I think I gave you a verse. Can you stand up and read it? Here you are.
Hebrews chapter 12, verse 11. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it.
Thank you, Michael. That's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. So if you guys want a good verse to kind of ruminate on throughout the week or look at before you go to bed, or if you're having a hard day, read Hebrews 12:11, right? No discipline seems pleasant at the time. It's hard in the moment, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. You young men showed discipline this morning. You probably had to wake up at 4:30, so you are already training in God's way. You have already accomplished the hardest thing you'll do probably the entire day. So you're going to have a great day the rest of this day after this. You can feel far from God sometimes, right? You can feel abandoned and alone. That's when you need to remind yourself that Jesus died for sinners, right? He died for the righteous and the unrighteous. His death was sufficient. It was substitutionary. It brings us closer to God. So the next time you feel like you deserve more or you're entitled to more, I try to remind myself to look at the cross and the sacrifice, and the grumbling should dissipate from that. Does God expect us to be perfect as humans? Who lived a perfect life? Only Jesus. None of us did, right? What about the rest of us? I would offer that the goal is not perfection, but perseverance. God does not expect us to walk in moral perfection. He does expect us to repent when we sin, right? So we're all sinners. We're going to recognize our sin, repent, and ask for forgiveness. So patient endurance is part of God's plan. So therefore, our faith should not be on our own perfection, but in God's perfection. And it's been taught to me before, our faith shouldn't be on how strong our grip is on life, but how strong His grip is on us, right? Because that's the perfect faith and the perfect Father. So this was a trial for me. This was a struggle. I couldn't move in the hospital, especially those first few weeks. I couldn't even brush my own teeth. I couldn't feed myself. My left arm was, completely covered in surgeries and bandages. I have scars all over. My right thumb was broken, so I couldn't lift this arm, and I couldn't manipulate this hand. I can move this arm, but I can't do anything with the hand, right? I can't move this arm at all. So I had to have someone brush my teeth. I had to have someone feed me. I had tubes in my lungs, the broken bones. It was the exact opposite of everything I trained for in my life, right? To be physically fit, to be morally strong, to be mentally awake. It was a huge challenge. But trials are a grace to us. And I know that's hard to recognize in the moment, but they are a good thing because they're from God and they are opportunities. Ted, can you stand up and read the verse that I gave you?